You talk a lot in the book about just kind of showing up, making sure that you are accountable and you show up for things you're supposed to, because that puts you in the position for your next step. Can you talk about that and how that, what that means to you?
Well, I think your presence is like 95% of the battle. Being there to letting people know that you care for them and that you're firmly interested in their well-being.
Right.
And not your well. So many times people give advice for what's in their best interest. But I've always subscribed to the theory that you want to help the person you're talking to.
Yeah.
And I got that from my father.
Right. What other things did your father teach you?
Well, my father taught me decency, understanding. My father was a milkman, and he would work on his milk truck, and his area that he was in was an immigrant area, and there was a lot of poor people. Mm-hmm. And he was ordered by the company that if they didn't pay the milk bill within 2 weeks, he was to stop the milk and not deliver milk. He had his own policy. If they had children, he didn't stop the milk.
Right.
And many times he even would put money from his own pocket to pay a portion of that bill and tell the company they were trying. So it was by his example, that I learned. It wasn't by empty words. So many times parents and others give advice. They're all empty words.
Yeah.
But I had the exemplar right before me with my dad and my mom.
Did you get to witness the appreciation that some of these people had for your father when he did that for them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My father was an extremely well-loved man. His name was Tup.
Tell me that story. That's a great story.
Tup of Toffee. Mm-hmm. My grandfather was a fruit peddler, and they'd go down to the farmer's market at 5 o'clock in the morning and load up their fruit cart. And on this particular day, it was a little chilly, and my father was minding the cart while my grandfather was in a restaurant with his friends having coffee. And after a while, my father went into the restaurant because it was cold. And his father says, would you like something? And he says his face was so frozen that he ordered a cup of toffee. He couldn't say cup of coffee because his face was frozen.
Right.
So from that day on, he was known as Tup or Tup of Toffee.
And everybody called him that.
Everybody called him Tup until the day he died.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. I want to go back to your education for a minute. I must have made your parents, but your father, incredibly proud to see the path you went on. When you finally passed the bar, when you became a lawyer, talk about that moment. What was that like for you?
That was a moment of extreme gratification because it was from the time that he put his hand on my shoulder besides the potbelly stove. And just to digress for a moment, sometimes you don't have to become histrionic or give big sermons to point somebody in life. Sometimes it's just a matter of putting your hand on their shoulder,
right,
and giving them some advice that comes from the heart. And that's what happened with me with my dad when he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Someday you'll be a lawyer." And it was a tough road, driving to Boston 4 nights a week, coming back. But I wouldn't want to disappoint him. I didn't want to disappoint myself either.
Right. Did you have an idea of what kind of path you wanted to take? I mean, I know some people are into criminal justice. Some people want to be family and marriage counselors, or lawyers. What was it for you that you really wanted to do when you went through law school?
That's a very good question because I really wanted to be a lawyer, but I wasn't thinking of specializing, for example, in corporate greed or anything like that. I really wanted to be a neighborhood lawyer.
You did?
And I was. And I was.
Can you talk about like the first job you had once you got your law degree? What were you doing?
When I graduated from where?
When you graduated and you got your law degree, what were your first jobs after that?
Oh, I had several jobs. I worked for the city as a lawyer for the city. I worked for the state prosecuting cases, and I had private practice.
Right. And is there any memory from before you became a judge while you were a lawyer, of a story or what it was like, before you were a judge and before you were the person we know now? What was it like being a lawyer?
Well, I had some very interesting cases, I had an interesting case where a young man came in for a divorce, and he was so distraught because he didn't want the divorce, and he ended up killing his wife.
Oh, wow.
So, I could just give you a litany of cases like that. We ended up trying him for murder. And he was found not guilty by reason of insanity. So he actually spent 15 years in jail. They let him out.
Oh, wow. Wow. So did you like doing private practice?
Did I what?
Did you like doing private practice? Did you like
I
doing
love
cases
private
like
practice.
that? Yeah.
Yes, I love private practice. It's a one-on-one situation. You know, when you're dealing with real issues, real people. You're not dealing with corporate America.
Right.
You're not dealing with a big checkbook. Half the people that came in couldn't afford it from my neighborhood.
Right.
Anyway, they come in and they didn't. You know, they come in. Frankie.
Right.
As soon as they said Frankie, I knew I couldn't charge them.
Right. Right. So, talk to me about how you became appointed a judge. Do you remember that story?
I do. As a matter of fact, it was because of a dear friend of mine who was the mayor at the time. His name was Joe Paolino. And Joe was a former president of the city council and member of the city council from the district in which I lived. And I knew him, and he was very talented. And I helped him in his campaign. And he called me one day and says, we have a vacancy on the Providence Municipal Court. And the vacancy is created and appointed by the Providence City Council, not by the mayor. And so I was fortunate that Joe was able to use his influence with the city council and his recommendation for me to be a judge. And that's how it all happened, and I've never forgotten it.
So for you, did you have to hesitate, or were you like, yes, this is what I want to do next? Did you have to hesitate when he asked you, or were you like,
oh, no,
yes?
I didn't hesitate at all.
Yeah.
No, that was a dream come true.
Right. So before we started seeing you on TV as a judge, explain what that first moment was like as a judge, that first day for you behind the bench.
First day, you know, I'm all full of myself now. I'm a judge, and I have the robe, and I'm the boss, and I'm up there, and this woman came in. She had 3 children, and she had a terrible attitude. And she says, I just can't pay this fine. I got 3 kids. I can't pay, and I don't care what you do. And I was a little rough with her, you know. So finally, she was so obstinate that I fined her the full amount, which she couldn't pay. So I put her on a payment plan.
Right.
And my dad was at the court because it was my first day, and he wanted to see his son on the bench the first day. So as soon as court's over, my dad comes in chambers. I said, Dad, how did I do? You know, I feel great now. He said, how did you do? You did terrible. I said, I did terrible. He said, that woman. I said, what woman? He said, the woman who had the 3 kids. He said, you fined her the full amount. How do you know she's going to be able to feed her kids tonight? How do you know she can't pay her rent? You got to go behind the facts. He says, you can't do that. You got to find out what people are about, what their circumstances are. And he gave me a real tough sermon.
Right.
And it changed my thinking thereafter.
So does that mean like literally the next day you went on the bench and you listened to cases, you started to really think about their experience and their human experience and if they deserved a second chance or...
Absolutely, because of my dad.